The world has never been more competitive than it is today. AI is writing ads faster than entire marketing teams. Startups are popping up by the hour. Every company talks about innovation, speed, and digital transformation, yet only a few actually survive. And the scariest part? Success today means nothing tomorrow. Just look across America. Hundreds of once iconic companies, BlackBerry, Yahoo, even WeWork, have collapsed, not because they ran out of money or ideas, but because they were fighting the wrong battle. Bruce Greenwald in Competition Demystified said something that shook the business world. In an era where everyone is trying to run faster, the winners are those who truly understand where they're playing and why they have the advantage. This book isn't just about corporate strategy. It's a roadmap for entrepreneurs, investors, and anyone trying to find their place in a world where technology is flattening every advantage. In this video, we'll uncover 6 core lessons from Competition Demystified to understand why some people can stand firm through the waves of AI and globalization, while others get swept away, no matter how hard they work. If you're building a business, investing for the future, or simply want to learn how to outsmart your competition through insight, not luck, make sure to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss more book summaries that help you rethink investing, entrepreneurship, and take one step closer to financial freedom. Part 1. Strategy isn't about running faster, it's about playing the right game. In business, we're often told the faster you move, the more likely you are to win. But Bruce Greenwald argues that this very belief is what kills most companies. In Competition Demystified, he writes, "Strategy is not about doing everything better than your competitors. It's about choosing a battle they can't win. In other words, speed only matters when you're on the right track." Greenwald points out that most companies fail not because they lack creativity, but because they don't understand where their true advantage lies. They see competitors growing fast, so they rush to expand, launch new products, hire more people. And somewhere along the way, they lose the very thing that made them different. Think back to the early 2010s when tech startups exploded across America. From food delivery to social media to fintech, everyone believed that growth at all costs meant victory. But just a few years later, over 90% of them disappeared. Not because they were bad at what they did, but because they were playing the wrong game. Greenwald gives a striking example. Look at Walmart in the 1970s. At the time, big retailers like Kmart and Sears focused on large cities. Walmart, instead of competing head-on, chose small towns, low-cost areas with little competition and underserved customers. People laughed at that strategy, but Walmart understood what others didn't. You don't have to win everywhere. You just need to dominate where you have the edge. The result, while Kmart and Sears crumbled, Walmart became the largest retailer in the world. And this lesson doesn't just apply to companies, it applies to individuals too. In the age of AI, where everyone is trying to learn more, move faster, and produce more, the key isn't to do more than others, but to choose the right place to invest your time and energy. If you're a startup founder, don't try to become the next Amazon. Find your own small town, a niche you understand better than anyone else. If you're an investor, don't chase the hottest stocks. Look where the market isn't paying attention, where you have an edge in insight or a longer-term vision. And if you're an employee, focus on your specialized knowledge and skills. Develop the kind of expertise that neither AI nor others can easily replace. Bruce Greenwald puts it perfectly. Strategy doesn't begin with action. It begins with understanding, knowing who you are, where you're strong, and what you should avoid. So if you've been running hard lately, maybe it's time to pause, because you might not need to run faster than anyone else. You just need to choose the right race and stay in it long enough for winning to become inevitable. Part 2. Local Advantage. The secret behind enduring empires. In the business world, we often admire companies that go global. But Bruce Greenwald says something that sounds almost counterintuitive. Every sustainable competitive advantage begins at the local level. In other words, before you dream of conquering the world, you need to dominate a small corner of it first. Let's go back to the days before Amazon became the e-commerce giant we know today. Jeff Bezos started with just an online bookstore. For years, he didn't try to sell everything. He simply focused on doing books better than anyone else. Amazon knew what customers liked, when they bought, and used that data to improve their experience. That tiny local edge in a single niche market became the foundation for Amazon's global expansion. Without local dominance, there would be no global dominance. Greenwald explains that when a company truly understands its local market, who the customers are, what they need, where they live, and how distribution costs work, it can control expenses, build customer loyalty, and create invisible barriers against competitors. He calls this local advantage, a strength that doesn't come from size or technology, but from how deeply you understand your own market. Take Coca-Cola, for example. Before it became a global icon, Coke spent decades perfecting its distribution network, city by city, state by state. Every dealer, every shop, every small cafe knew exactly how to store, display, and sell the product. When Pepsi tried to expand nationwide too quickly, Coca-Cola had already rooted itself deeply into every community, so no matter how much Pepsi spent on advertising, it couldn't break those local relationships. That's what real local advantage looks like: a web of trust, knowledge, and connections that can't be replicated by money or technology alone. If you want a modern example, look at Uber and Grab. Uber brought a one-size-fits-all playbook to every market. Grab, on the other hand, did the opposite when it entered Southeast Asia. It learned each city, each customer habit, each driver's routine. Grab localized its app, added native languages, digital wallet payments, and built strong relationships with local governments. The result? Uber pulled out of Southeast Asia, and Grab became the regional powerhouse. Not because Grab had more money, but because it had local advantage. What Greenwald calls the last sustainable weapon in a globalized world. He wrote, "When you dominate a small market, you set the rules. But when you try to win everywhere, you're forced to play by someone else's." And that's the core lesson here. Before you dream of building a global empire, ask yourself, have you truly mastered your own small village? Because every great empire, whether it's Walmart, Amazon, or Grab, started with something small, a place they understood better, served better, and stayed committed to longer than anyone else. Part 3. When scale stops being an advantage. For decades, business leaders believed in one universal truth: bigger means stronger. The larger you are, the lower your costs, the more market share you gain, and the easier it is to crush smaller competitors. But Bruce Greenwald warns, when fixed costs fall because of technology, scale stops being a fortress and starts becoming a burden. Think back to the era of General Electric, GE. It once symbolized the power of scale, a massive conglomerate spanning electronics, finance, energy, and aviation. In the 20th century, GE's playbook was simple: expand, dominate, be number one or number two in every industry. But as the world moved into the digital age, giants like GE began to slow down. They couldn't pivot fast enough when technology shifted. Each division was like a giant ship that took years to change direction. Meanwhile, small startups like Tesla, Nvidia, and SpaceX surged ahead. Not because they had more money, but because they could focus all their resources in one direction. Technology flattened the world, and with it, the advantage of size. Greenwald breaks it down clearly. In the old economy, production, distribution, and marketing costs were so high that only the giants could survive.
But today, AI, automation, and cloud infrastructure have completely flipped that equation. A team of 10 engineers can now build an AI tool that competes directly with a corporation of 10,000 employees. A small company in Texas can sell software worldwide with nothing more than a website and a few ad campaigns on X, Twitter. Scale no longer protects you. It traps you in bureaucracy, slow decisions, and outdated thinking. And perhaps the clearest example is Kodak. For most of the 20th century, Kodak dominated the film industry. It had the technology, the distribution network, and a brand no one could touch. In fact, Kodak itself invented the digital camera in 1975 and then buried it. Why? Because it feared that new technology would destroy its film empire. Meanwhile, smaller and more agile players like Canon and Sony had no such baggage and quickly captured the digital camera market. Greenwald calls this the inversion of scale, the moment when rapid change turns size into weakness. In today's hyper-competitive world, power no longer comes from how many assets or employees you have, but from how fast you can learn, test, and adapt. And here's the message for every investor, founder, and professional. Don't be blinded by big names or big numbers. Because in a world reshaped by AI and technology, flexibility and adaptability are the new competitive advantages. Sometimes the winner isn't the one who's bigger, it's the one who truly understands the game they're in and has the courage to change when the world does.
Part 4. The innovation trap, when creativity isn't enough to win. We live in an era where innovation is worshipped like a magic key. Every company claims to be innovative. Every startup boasts about its disruptive technology. But Bruce Greenwald makes it clear. Creativity is necessary, but never sufficient. If you can't protect the value you create, innovation will only make someone else rich. Take the legendary story of Xerox PARC, the research lab that invented the building blocks of modern computing. The mouse, the graphical user interface, Ethernet, even the laser printer. But instead of becoming Apple, Microsoft, or Cisco, Xerox watched from the sidelines as others turned those inventions into billion-dollar empires. In 1979, Steve Jobs visited PARC. He saw their prototypes and instantly realized, this is the future. The difference? Apple didn't just innovate, it executed. It turned ideas into products, brands, and experiences that customers were willing to pay for. Innovation without a defense strategy is the perfect recipe for failure. Greenwald points out that many companies fail not because they lack creativity, but because they misunderstand the competitive structure of their industry. They believe that having a better product or smarter technology is enough. But the truth is, innovation's value can be stolen in months if you don't have local dominance, brand strength, or market barriers to protect it. Remember BlackBerry, once a symbol of mobile innovation. Physical keyboards, top-tier security, a loyal customer base. But when Apple launched the iPhone, BlackBerry hesitated. It was afraid to disrupt itself, afraid to upset its existing customers, and that hesitation cost it everything. Greenwald calls this the innovation trap, where companies believe they're moving forward, but without a clear strategic foundation, they're actually digging their own graves. Because innovation is just the spark, strategy is the gunpowder. If you don't have a cost advantage, a loyal customer base, or a local monopoly to protect your position, your innovation will only help your competitors learn faster. A modern example? Think of Clubhouse, the audio app that exploded in 2020. Its idea was fresh, real-time voice chats, no video, no filters. But within months, Twitter Spaces, Spotify Green Room, and Facebook Audio copied the model. Clubhouse lost its edge, its users drifted away, and today it's nearly forgotten. Not because it lacked creativity, but because it lacked defensibility, a strategy to protect its value. That's the lesson Greenwald drives home. In today's competitive world, ideas are not rare. What's rare is the ability to build and sustain an advantage around those ideas. Creativity makes you stand out. Strategy keeps you alive. So when everyone is rushing to innovate, don't just ask, what new thing can I create? Ask instead, what can I protect? What can I make uncopyable? Because in the game of business, the smartest player isn't the one who invents the light. It's the one who figures out how to sell it to the world.
Part 5. Know your enemy before you move. In the business world, many people lose not because they lack ability, but because they don't understand the game their competitors are playing. Bruce Greenwald calls this the most fundamental principle of competition. Before you attack, understand who you're attacking, where they're strong, where they're weak, and whether it's even worth attacking at all. And that's exactly what most companies and even investors ignore. If there's one perfect example of this lesson in the modern tech world, it's TikTok. When TikTok started spreading across the US and around the globe, many in the tech world, including executives at Facebook and YouTube, dismissed it as just a short video app for teenagers dancing and lip-syncing. They didn't realize TikTok wasn't competing in the video arena, it was competing for attention, the most valuable resource in the digital age. While Facebook focused on social connections and YouTube optimized for longer videos with slower recommendation systems, TikTok analyzed user behavior second by second. Every swipe was a signal of emotion, interest, and reaction. TikTok understood something the giants overlooked. People don't search for content, they search for emotion. And that blind spot allowed TikTok to break old models and become the fastest-growing social platform in history. Greenwald explains, a small company should never confront a giant head-on, unless it finds a strategic blind spot, a place the big player can't see or doesn't take seriously. Take Netflix, for example. When it was still a DVD by mail company, it didn't challenge Blockbuster in physical retail stores. Instead, it targeted a neglected segment, customers who didn't have time to visit a store, and built a direct relationship with users. By the time Blockbuster reacted, Netflix had already gained something money couldn't buy: data, trust, and consumer habits. The same lesson applies to investing. Many people buy stocks simply because they've heard the company is growing fast, without asking, who are they competing with, and what prevents others from doing the same thing or better. As Peter Lynch once said, if you can't explain why a company can beat its competitors, don't invest in it. Greenwald goes even further. Never look at a company as an island. Look at it within its competitive ecosystem. Another great case is Costco. Instead of competing directly with Walmart in the retail race, Costco chose to play on a different field: low-cost wholesale, membership-based shopping. As a result, it didn't just survive, it thrived. Because it deeply understood who it served and what its competitors couldn't serve well. Understanding your competition isn't just about knowing what they do, it's about understanding how they think, what they fear, and what they undervalue. In every industry, there's always a competitive blind spot, a small crack left open by the giants who are too big, too confident, or too slow to see it. Winners aren't those with the most resources, but those who strike at the right time, in the right place, against the right weakness. Key takeaway: before you enter a market or make an investment, pause and ask 3 questions. How well do I truly understand my competitors? How will they react when I show up? And is there a blind spot they haven't noticed yet? Because in the game of competition, the winner isn't the fastest runner, it's the one who understands the board the deepest.
Part 6. Lessons for investors and professionals. There's one idea Bruce Greenwald repeats throughout Competition Demystified. In a world full of competition, understanding your limits is just as important as understanding your potential. It sounds simple, but it's a guiding principle for both investors and working professionals, because every day, both must decide where to focus their energy to create the greatest value. For investors, in the market, there are generally two kinds of people. The first believes they can beat the market. The second believes no one can beat the market. Bruce Greenwald stands somewhere in between. He says, "You can't win everywhere, but you can win where you understand better than anyone else." In other words, instead of trying to predict global trends, find a small circle of knowledge, a place where you have an advantage in information, perspective, or experience. That's your circle of competence, a concept made famous by Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. Greenwald believes great investors don't need to be the smartest, they just need to be the most disciplined. Disciplined enough to ignore 99 tempting opportunities and focus only on the one they deeply understand. Now, from the perspective of a working professional, in today's workplace, many people believe success means running faster, doing more, knowing more. But Greenwald would say, no, you just need to understand your playing field better. High performers aren't those who do everything. They're those who know what game they're really playing and what truly creates value in that game. A brilliant engineer doesn't need to become a CEO. A creative designer doesn't need to turn into a manager. If you climb the wrong ladder, every step only takes you further away from your strengths. In the age of AI, this lesson is even more critical today. Machines can work faster, cheaper, and more precisely, but they still can't understand humans the way humans understand each other. The question every worker must ask is, what do I have that AI can't copy? It might be empathy, the ability to ask better questions, or a deep understanding of a niche that others overlook. That's your personal moat, the human version of a competitive advantage. The core lesson: whether you're investing or building a career, learn to view the world through the lens of competition. Don't try to be the best at everything. Be irreplaceable at one thing. And once you've found your playing field, stay there long enough for every competitor to give up. At the end of his book, Bruce Greenwald leaves no formula, no checklist, just a quiet reminder. Advantage doesn't come from speed, it comes from understanding, and understanding doesn't come from genius, it comes from patience and observation. If you're building a startup, investing, or simply want to understand how businesses really win in a competitive world, you should read Competition Demystified by Bruce Greenwald. I've left a link to the book in the description below so you can explore it yourself and discover your true advantage in a world full of noise.